Almost every team in the main four sports leagues have had a good stretch at some point in their history. This stretch might have just been them consistently making the playoffs, or perhaps it was them winning a championship or two. Maybe it lasted a few years, or maybe even a couple decades. No matter how great or how long, there always comes a time where that great stretch eventually comes to an end and the team enters a period of mediocrity and or worse. The Washington Capitals were reaching that point. Their players were getting old, others were leaving to greener pastures, and the once easy lock-in for the playoffs was now barely sneaking in. And with the power rankings grading them as nothing special, it seemed like their great stretch and the Penguins were at long last coming to an end. And then this season happened. Instead of continuing to decline like everyone expected, the Caps said nuh-uh and became one of the best teams in the league again. In fact, as of this video, they are currently competing with the Winnipeg Jets for tippy top of the standings. As one glance at the standings can tell you, this season has been filled with surprises, but none of them are bigger and more shocking than that of George Washing Machine. I don't think even the most Delulu Caps fans could have ever predicted that this team would have been a front runner for the President's Trophy halfway into the season. That's pretty awesome if you're, a fan of this team, but how exactly did it happen? Well, would you like to find out, Mr. Rhinoceros? Oh, right, you can't talk on account of you being a fucking rhinoceros. First, let's look at the goals forced stat. But not for this season. No, let's look at last season's goals forced. Last season, the Capitals team that barely made the playoffs had scored 220 goals, which is, a lot, aside from the fact that 27 other teams scored more. So that's like the 5th least goals in the entire NHL, but not just that, but they've also given up more goals than they have scored. Which, doesn't sound like a big of a deal considering the Stars did that a few years ago and they made the playoffs, but they gave up 8 more goals. The Capitals gave up 37 more goals. That negative 37 goal differential is the worst for a playoff team since 1991, and that was back when all but 5 teams were making the playoffs. So a big issue with last season's Caps was that they weren't scoring very much. This is an issue that this season's Caps doesn't have at all. They have Uno reversed from 5th least goals scored to a 3-way race for 2nd most goals scored at 171. A little over halfway through the season, and the Caps are already less than 50 goals away from matching their previous season. 2 players who have big thank yous to give for this big increase in scoring are off-season acquisitions Pierre-Luc Dubois and Jacob Chychrun, who have 39 and 32 points respectively. In Dubois' case, you also have to congratulate him for turning it around because holy shit, we thought he was cooked after last season. There's also those stupid little drooling fucking baby players like Alexei Protas and Connor McNaught-David who have had big growth spurts in their careers and are scoring plenty of goals. You have Dylan Strome, who's the Capitals' highest point scorer. You have Tom Wilson, who's a longtime vet, potentially having his best season. And of course, there's Alex Ovechkin. Let's go ahead and talk about that third one. For those of you who don't care about hockey and yet are somehow watching this video because of, I assume, one of these reasons, Alex Ovechkin is one of the greatest hockey players of all time. Ever since being picked first overall by the Caps 7 years before any of you were born, he has gathered a whole grocery list of awards, records, and all the sorts of accolades, including the Stanley Cup and the Conn Smythe Trophy. However, nothing shows just how great he was quite like the number of goals he scored. His 875 goals are the 2nd most ever scored by an NHL player in the NHL. The only Mr. Macaroni who has scored more goals than Ovechkin is none other than Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time. There's no MJ LeBron, no Ronaldo Messi debate. He is very undisputedly the best. He is so good that some of the facts about him don't even sound real. One fact that does sound real is that he has the most goals in the NHL. His 894 goals make the Great One the only number with more goals than the Great 8. However, that could change very soon. As for those of you who can't count, Ovi is only 20 goals away from breaking Gretzky's Retsky. And in fact, since the start of the season, Ovi's actually been rapidly approaching that 895th goal that he needs to break the record. It's honestly to the point where unless he decides to retire or gets bitch slapped by Father Time so hard that he falls off the top of King Dakar, it might not be a matter of if, but when he breaks the record. And by doing so, he would make everyone who ever said Gretzky was the highest goal scorer in the NHL since March 23rd, 1994 a bunch of lying sacks of shit. But enough of that breaking records mumbo jumbo, let's talk about the rest of the team. Now looking at the GA goals against instead of the GF, we can see that the Caps have given up the least goals at 118, which gives them an amazing plus-minus of plus 53. Both of these, of course, are very different from last season. I've already explained one half of the secret formula that's led to this, but what about the other half? Well, as you've probably guessed, Washington's goalies have been spectacular. You know, except for this.
Lindgren. Oh, he put it in his own net! Charlie Lindgren!
Of the Wall-certified duo, Logan Thompson has been the more elite of the two, with him being third in wins, second in goals against average, and third in save percentage. That sounds pretty good, but what sounds even better is his 2 losses in regulation. Yeah, only 2. And then you include the 3 overtime losses to get a total of 5 losses in 26 starts and 27 games. For context, Connor Hellebuck, arguably the best goalie in the NHL right now, has more regulation losses than Logan has any losses this season. Considering Thompson is still pretty young and is also another one of those new faces, I'm sure the team's really happy to see him doing this well.
I think this here means they are.
But don't be sleeping on Charlie Lindgren. Yeah, he ain't as good as the Low Gang, but he's still been pretty damn good. And he's made some pretty cool saves as well, like this one against the Canucks when he was heading to the bench but came back to make this amazing save. It's weird how Charlie did that, but also did this in the same season, but, you know, tomato, tomato. But you know what makes having these great goaltenders even better for the Capitals? The Pittsburgh Penguins. As while George Washington has had some amazing brick walls to protect the net, Mr. Happy Feet has had the exact opposite. Whilst Ovechkin's team has only given up 118 goals, Crosby's team has handed out 191 goals as if it's candy. That's the second most in the NHL, by the way. And judging by the standings, you know, maybe this whole goaltending thing might be kind of important for making a winning hockey team. And that's exactly what the Capitals have made. Or I guess more accurately have gone back to making. They have done something the Penguins couldn't, and that is escape the clutches of mediocrity. What happens next is entirely up to them. Maybe they'll win the Stanley Cup. Maybe they'll lose in the final. Maybe they'll shit the bed and get swept in the first round. Whatever happens, the Washington Capitals are in a great spot right now, and the future is looking pretty good for them. Anyways, that's it. The video's over. You can leave now. Goodbye. Bleh.